Most of the dead were never counted. The sea is a patient archivist, but it keeps no names. In the wake of battle, there is a strange, hollow silence. The roar of cannon fire gives way to the gentle lapping of water against splintered wood, the groan of a dying ship. Here, on the vast, indifferent canvas of the North Sea, the true price of war is paid. Not in gold, not in territory, but in men. Men who floated in the cold embrace of the water, their faces turned towards a sky they could no longer see. Their final moments were not glorious charges, but desperate gasps for air. Look past the flags and the admirals' reports. Look to the decks, slick with more than just sea water. This is where the story truly unfolds. It's a story written in blood and fear. A single cannonball, a crude sphere of iron, does not just punch a hole in a ship's hull. It explodes a shower of wooden splinters, turning the very structure of the vessel into 1,000 daggers. Men who were hauling ropes or loading cannons, one moment were cut down the next, their bodies torn apart by the ship that was supposed to protect them. They fell where they stood amidst the chaos, their cries for help swallowed by the din of battle. For others, the enemy wasn't a cannonball, but fire. A stray spark, a lantern overturned, and the tarred ropes and dry timbers of a warship become a funeral pyre. Trapped below deck, with smoke filling their lungs and flames licking at the companionways, there was no escape. The heat would warp the wood, sealing their fate. Their screams would echo through the lower decks, unheard by those fighting for their own lives above. The ship, once their home and their fortress, became their tomb. The water that surrounded them, a cool, unattainable salvation, would eventually claim the scorched husk and all who were imprisoned within it. Survival on a crippled ship was its own form of damnation. As a vessel lost its masts, its rudder shattered, it became a helpless, drifting coffin. It would wallow in the troughs of the waves, taking on water, slowly, inexorably surrendering to the sea. For the men aboard, it was a terrifyingly slow death sentence. They could do nothing but watch as the water crept higher, climbing the decks, reclaiming the ship inch by inch. Some would cling to wreckage, their strength failing in the frigid water. Others would simply wait on the canting deck, staring at the horizon, knowing help would not arrive in time. The end was not a sudden bang, but a slow, gurgling descent into the abyss. And for the wounded, the lucky few who survived the initial onslaught faced a new horror. The ship surgeon, often a man with little more than a saw and a bottle of rum, could offer only brutal, primitive care. A shattered limb meant amputation, performed without anesthetic on a rolling deck, with infection an almost certain outcome. Men with internal injuries or severe burns were simply made as comfortable as possible, left to die in agony. They'd beg for water, their voices weak, their pleas often lost in the desperate work of keeping the ship afloat. Officers, bound by duty, would have to step over their own dying crewmen, forced to prioritize the ship over the men who sailed it. Compassion was a luxury that naval warfare rarely afforded. The sea kept their names. Imagine the dawn after a battle. The sun rises on a scene of utter desolation. The sea, once teeming with proud warships, is now littered with debris. A broken mast, a tattered flag, a sailor's hat floating aimlessly. The victors, battered and bruised, count their own losses, their decks cleared of the dead and dying. Survivors stand in numb silence, staring at the empty spaces where their friends once stood. They look out at the vast, empty ocean, knowing that beneath its waves lie hundreds, perhaps thousands, of their comrades and their enemies. There are no markers, no graves, just the endless, rolling water. The sea has absorbed them all, without record, without ceremony. They have become a part of its cold, dark mystery. Back in port, there would be talk of heroes, of grand strategy, of national pride. Bells might ring and flags would be flown. But for the families of the common sailors, there was only waiting. A wife on the coast of Suffolk, a mother in a small village near Amsterdam, would stare at the horizon, waiting for a ship that would never return their loved one. Official records were scant, often inaccurate. A man was simply gone, lost at sea. A vague, empty phrase that could never capture the splintered wood, the choking smoke, the cold, dark water. The war claimed more than ships. It claimed futures. It shattered families. It created a generation of widows and orphans whose grief was never entered into the ledgers of victory. When the treaties were finally signed in 1654, the war ended. The great ships of the line, the pride of England and the Dutch Republic, returned to their harbors. They were repaired, repainted, and readied for the next conflict. Their captains were celebrated. The politicians declared peace. But the men who had paid the ultimate price for this peace remained where they had fallen. They did not return to the cheers or the quiet grief of their families. They were left behind in the silent, unmarked graveyards of the North Sea, their stories untold, their sacrifices uncounted. Victory sailed home. The sailors did not.